Well, hello. And I had intended to have Seth hidden right now, but since you're here, Seth, we'll just have you on. This is
At
what
least we
happens.
were still talking.
Yeah. This is what happens, everybody, when we're running and running late and trying to get things started and dealing with all of our wonderful technical issues. Your
This is
direct,
pre-recorded. You could just edit it out later.
yeah, we'll fix it in post, as I say.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah. So, welcome to TSG Live Talking Trains. Let me make Seth go away real quick, and we'll start the way we intended to. This is what happens when your director, producer, and whatever is not paying attention. Hi,
Well,
everybody.
I see the secret producer back there. Apparently, she just didn't kick you hard enough before the show.
Oh well, I do deserve to be kicked, but that's a whole different story. This is TSG Live Talking Trains. Welcome. I'm John, your regular host. I have a guest co-host to right here. What is this? My right on the screen.
That is correct.
Everybody knows you, Heath. You're like the most
Everybody
popular.
knows me, and this is about what they expect from any show that I'm on. So I
Right.
think we are doing just fine.
Yep. Even when I'm not the producer. But I have to say that I'm really impressed with what you do, because you have that little thing that you push the buttons and it always goes where you want the cameras go, where you want them to go. And you have like 100 cameras in that little space you have there.
I'm 102 now, but yes,
Okay.
it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like a video game, but
Yeah.
my little world.
So our intention today is to talk about technology in model railroading, which is something that you've been doing a lot of experimentation with on your setup there. And then we're also going to talk about operations, which is something that I know you've been getting much more into. And I kind of went down that rabbit hole a few years ago and still haven't come out of it. I find operations really fun. And that's really, I think, my primary enjoyment in the hobby. I started out really liking DCC and DCC installs, and I tried some weathering, and that was a lot of fun. But when I got into operations, I'm like, oh, now this is really cool. So it's something that I think we'll enjoy talking about and comparing notes of, getting started and whatever. And I thought when we were setting up this program, well, gee, we always have a guest.
Wait, are you saying we planned something for this?
We actually, well, I did. I don't know what you were doing, but I was planning something. And that was, I thought, if we're going to talk about technology, I know a guy that runs a technology company that's geared toward model railroading. And I've had him on the show to talk about that stuff before. And then I thought, oh, if we're going to be talking about operations, I know this guy that's really into operations. And as a matter of fact, his name is on one of the co-authors of the OPSIG Compendium of Operations. And it just so happens to be the same guy. So I thought we'd invite our friend Seth to come on. So I'm going to bring him up on here. That's you, Seth. That was your introduction. Did I do good?
You're great. And I just love it, because I love to operate, and it's fun to build layouts, and it's great to build cars and structures and scenery. But, I know a lot of guys who are builders, and they get to the end, and the first thing they're thinking about is tearing it down and building another one. And, that's great. And you see some superb modeling, but, it's even more fun to run the layout. And, people say to me, well, you've been working on that layout for 20 years and it's still not done. And I say, well, I built the layout to operate. And if somebody invites me to an op session, that's kind of what I'm about. So I'll probably go to the op session first and work on the layout later.
Right. And that's where I'll see you.
So I love it. And, the tagline on my business card is electronics for operations. So that kind of tells you where I am. So I'm just delighted to be on the show. We always have a great time. And, Heath has been, having a very nice, narrated journey on a couple of the lists. And he's going to some great places. And, there's a few that I'd like to go with him, and a few that I've been there and happy to show the way. So, this is really just going to be a really fun hour. And, for your audience who is hoping for a really sophisticated, slick marketing pitch, I think we're going to, talk about some stuff that we do, but mostly we're just going to have three guys chatting about, how we love operations and how cool electronics can enhance your operating experience.
Yeah. Plus, Seth, if they were looking for a slick marketing experience, they came to the wrong place with me.
No, wrong place. Wrong place.
I can't even start the damn show without screwing something up.
Hey, I couldn't get my camera working without Heath helping. So,
right. Well,
between
between the three of us, we might add up to one brain cell.
Well, that's, there's negative brain cells. It's like quarks, like 2 + 2/3 and a minus 2/3. So,
yeah,
we kind of end up at a little more than one.
I was joking with Heath before the show, like this morning or maybe last night, about how I always like to be the dumbest person in the room so that I can learn something. And I think I set myself up for success on this one. I mean, it's kind of a low bar anyway,
Well, I think we're all going to learn something. And I hope, anybody who's, prepared to invest an hour or so in this drivel will learn something too.
Yeah.
We'll certainly have fun doing it. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Well, we always have fun talking. I think I have fun talking with both of you guys, so it should be good. One thing I do want to mention is, so for people watching, the idea then is to talk about technology first, and we'll get into operations after that. And Seth, since you're our featured guest, we have, the program provides an hour or about an hour, the first hour of the show, for you to talk about the technology. And of course, we'll have questions and all that good stuff. I'll probably not have a lot of questions because usually this tech talk goes straight over my head. And but I can certainly chime in about ops, because that's something, as I've mentioned, I've been really enjoying for the past several years now. And I'm really excited, Heath, for you to be getting into ops, because it's something that at least Sydney and I both have really enjoyed a lot. So
and
it's
really
very new for me. I didn't even realize it existed. So it's been a fun adventure so far.
You said something about operations, Heath, that kind of struck a chord with me, which was something to the effect that, and we can talk, we'll talk about it later, but before I forget, I wanted to mention it, that you said something like it never really occurred to you that you could do something other than some kind of a circle or something to that effect. And I thought, that I think where a lot of people are. So I think
I would ask, is there anybody in the audience that ever saw a layout that wasn't, or their first layout that they saw wasn't a circle around the Christmas tree or at a train show or somewhere else? There, very likely everybody saw some train running in a loop, as their early experience.
Yeah. So that's a little preview, I guess, of what we'll be talking after the tech talk. And it'll be good though. I'm excited. So Seth, did you have some kind of a little slideshow you wanted to start off with to get us jumping into the tech talk?
I do, and it's the one that I uploaded. I can, there we go. Excellent.
Oh, Model Railroad Control Systems. I've heard of them. I think I know the guy that runs it.
Yeah, that guy with the unruly hair. So Model Railroad Control Systems, MRCS, is a business that I started with my late business partner, Chuck Catania, back in 2014 or 2015. We'd both been working on a number of projects, and it turns out actually, selling a little bit of the stuff as finished product, but mostly we were working on other people's layouts in the Bay Area and Northern California more broadly. And we pretty soon found out we were working on the same projects. I was doing phones and some signaling. Chuck was doing signaling and some train order board systems, which are important in timetable and train order operation. And we'll get to that later in the show. you think of timetable and train order as dark railroads, which generally it was, but interestingly enough, technology helps with that too. So let me give you a quick presentation. This was one I originally did for the Rails by the Bay virtual convention in 2020. There's a few things that aren't quite up to date, but the point is not to walk you through the MRCS product line. If you want, it's www.modelrailroadcontrolsystems.com. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's just all of that with no spaces. And you can see all these things and get some more information. And, of course, feel free to hit the contact us button and ask more questions. But what do we do? Again, putting cool electronics for operations in modelers' hands. That's really the mission statement. Now, most of this stuff is open source, which means we don't patent it. We post the plans, we post the code, we post the computer automated drafting files. So you can build this stuff yourself. You can take the ideas and modify them. If you've got something great and you're not into the business of running a model railroad business, I'm happy to take contributions. Almost half the products actually are designed by other people. What I do is run the store, handle the fulfillment. Many of these products are generally available for overnight shipment if I'm in town. There are some products, and we'll cover some of them, that are commercial products. And of course, the manufacturers expect to make a decent profit, but we keep the minimum markup we can to cover our e-commerce costs and, the various fees our banks and PayPal and so forth charge. And it's not inconsiderable, but the benefit to you is, of course, if you're up at 3 a.m, as Heath often is, because I see his orders come in, and you place an order, and it's there at 7 a.m. in Pacific time. When I check my mail, it'll probably go out that day. And
I want to interrupt you real quick. Sydney said something here, and I want to tell people, I hope this doesn't mess you up, Seth, but it's a compliment, which is, Sydney says, Seth is super helpful and really does encourage questions. This is all true. And I can tell people from sitting there in your office, basically to your right, where you're sitting right now, Seth, that I've been there when we were doing a video about something else, whatever it was, and the phone rings, and Seth always picks up the phone, and he had a fairly lengthy conversation. I know, because I was waiting because I wanted to get on with our production. And when he hung up the phone, I said something like, "Oh, that must be a very important customer. What did he buy?" And Seth turned to me and said, "He didn't buy anything from me. I'm just trying to help him out." So it's true. Seth is very helpful. Maybe to your time's detriment, Seth.
Could be. Maybe why I'm always overcommitted. But anyway, we do that.
It was meant in the highest form of a compliment.
well, thank you so much. And anyway, like I say, we handle some commercial stuff. Usually it's so that you can buy everything from one source. We have international customers. They're facing high shipping costs. If I can bundle it together for them, that's a win all around. And some people just like to have one throat to choke. So, that's okay too. I'm happy to help them. So what do we have? Chuck and I had started out with something called CP Node, which are controllers primarily for signaling systems in CTC. That's centralized train control, or traffic control, which are the big green consoles with all the levers you see in many transition era layouts modeling heavy traffic railroads. They were originally designed by a very fine gentleman named Bruce Chubb. Bruce, started getting on in age and just didn't want to keep refreshing the product line. We wanted to build somewhat smaller nodes than his. His were typically 72 lines or more, so that we could put a control point underneath every end of a signaled siding, which is called a control point. So we made CP nodes, or control point nodes, which were small nodes that actually can be expanded. It was to make it a little easier to deploy CMRI, and we were doing this in our business of putting in signaling systems for other modelers. So that's fairly extensive and a very handy way of controlling layouts. CMRI is the oldest of the major layout control buses, probably still has the largest installed base. Bruce thought it was around 5,000 layouts a year or two ago, last time I talked to him about it. My guess is it's probably 3,500, but whatever it is, out of a total of maybe 10,000 signaled layouts, it's at least a third, maybe as much as a half. LocoNet's pretty popular. LCC has been around for about 10 years now, and is something 15 or 20% is my guess. It's a little hard to say because some of these systems are very small, a computer and a couple of nodes for a very small layout or experimentation. And some of them are like Bruce Chubb's, 20 nodes, thousands of inputs and outputs, 3,000-foot basement on 5 levels.
I have a dumb question. And this is something for the viewers as well. When you talk about nodes, what are you talking about? What's a node?
Well, a node, all these things really do, any layout control system, is provides a way for a bunch of inputs and outputs around the layout to be brought in to the computer so you can make decisions about what to do. And then, of course, you send them back out. So inputs are things like push buttons on control panels, detection of occupancy, is a train in the block or not. Many other things. Perhaps you want to check that your switch really through when you sent it a command. Those would be inputs. Outputs typically are controls to motors, to switch motors, and to signals, lights. So you bring these into a thing, and you don't want to, it's just impractical to bring all the wires back to one point for any reasonable size layout. So a node is a place where you break out the main control line, and this is where you essentially go from the wholesale pipe running around the layout to the retail servicing of the individual signals and switches. So that's
it's an addressable board that gives you information, basically.
Yeah, and on that address, there are a number of I/O lines. In the case of CP nodes, anywhere between 16 and 144. And Anthony, yes, that's exactly what Chuck and I were doing. And, I still do a little bit of that. So that's what that business was about. Then phone systems for operation, I think that's fairly straightforward. These are mostly party line phone systems, very similar to what the railroads used to dispatch up to about 1986 with the coming of UCOR. That was the point where radio was reliable enough that you didn't need to use landlines. So it's somewhat era dependent, but anything from probably the 1920s to the mid 1985s probably was dispatched by telephone. And that was the chapter I wrote in the OPSIG compendium. And, I've done probably 100, maybe 150 phone systems for layouts over the years. So, and I was in the phone business most of my career. So something I'm fairly comfortable with. What else do we sell? Switch motors, drivers for switch motors, mounts for switch motors, accessories for all types. We handle the MP motors. It's okay to talk about other people's podcasts, I assume. Charlie Bishop did a review a few months ago on our MP5. Luke Towan was talking about MP1s. I know Guy Knapp wrote a nice review on the MP10 in Shortline Narrow Gauge Gazette just recently. The importer, who's sort of my partner in the motor business, is around the corner working on a demo, and hopefully I'll have it running and we'll show it to you later. But
Richard's still working feverishly in the other room.
Fire up the thingy here. Here's a
Sure.
couple of examples.
Fire up the thingy. I'm going to see if I can make that. There we go.
Here's the thingy firer. So these are different. Oh, I'm gonna trigger the OCD alarm.
You triggered me again, Seth. How dare you?
Oh, he's triggered. Triggered. This is supposed to be a safe place.
The MP5 is upside down. It's really bothering me.
Is it?
The MP1 is too. Oh, look. I feel so much better now. Thank you.
Well, okay. So I'm glad John has some peace of mind. The MP10's a little tilted, but these are little switch motors, and you can see they're quite small. That's your typical X-Acto cutting mat. So they're under 2 inches by 2 inches. In fact, the MP10 is the cross section of a tortoise. But look, whoops.
It's not very deep, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's 22 millimeters high. So they're very compact. They're great for upper decks. They're great for modules where you don't want stuff hanging down. They're very popular. The biggest problem I have with that product line is keeping it in stock. As I say, I have like another 12 cases of switch machines coming in from Czechoslovakia or Czechia as we speak. Okay, let's go back to the Prezo. I had to do my little pitch, but these are our very hot selling item and people love them. Simple signaling systems. So signaling systems.
Whoops, sorry about that.
That don't require a computer to run. Train order boards and parts for CTC boards. And then, I do a bunch of random projects for clubs and people who I need a circuit board that does that. Would you be willing to do it? And I just enjoy making the boards, so that's fun. And we have a little Wi-Fi fast clock system, which is also an operational thing we'll get to. But if you're doing timetables and you care about time, then obviously having a clock that everybody can see scattered around the railroad is helpful. Oh boy, here's a bunch of updates and stuff. Really, you can look at my website if you want that. Just for an example, though, here's a CP node. You can see it's about 4 inches wide and or 5 inches wide and 3 inches long. And it's got a little Arduino. That's the little blue guy in the lower right-hand corner. And it talks to your computer using the CMRI net standard. Which is very inexpensive, low cost, old industrial control bus, been around since the 60s, still getting new design ins today, does what it does and does it well. So, it's not obsolete if you still, can do what you want to do with it. We have several different flavors of those, not going to bore you to death. This is just a cost reduced version of the same thing. We'll talk a little bit about that. But if you go back to the first one, you can see that the processor's on a little motherboard, and that means the processor can be changed while the connections stay the same. So this is not because processors fail a lot. It's because we wanted to provide a migration path. And Heath and I will probably be talking about one of the things you might want to migrate to a little later in the show.
I actually just posted the question in chat to kind of tee it up, but we were on the same wavelength there.
Is it this one?
Yes, exactly.
Right. This is where you guys are going to get all nerdy on me about this.
That's right. You? We're going to go nerdy and start speaking in tongues.
All 3-letter, 4-letter abbreviations.
We ran out of the TLAs and went to the FLAs because we didn't have enough unique TLAs left.
Did you see what happened just now?
Business. Yeah, 3-letter abbreviations. So
I know 3-letter words. That's about as complicated as I get.
We have plenty of 4-letter words.
I know some of those too.
Seth is another one.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you can see years of being a product manager in telecommunications is, old habits die hard. detectors, detector motherboards. What else do we do? All kinds of good stuff. Phones, all sorts of what's happened in the phone product line over the last few years is originally I started out using old phone equipment that, in the 2000s when I started was still around. It was still being replaced with newer digital phone equipment. Now that's pretty much gone, and it belongs to collectors. And sadly, the phone collector demographic is probably 5 or 10 years ahead of ours. So the problem is most of the people who know how to use this. Does it work within? Well, yes, but Anthony asked a good question. Does the stuff work with NCC? In fact, CMRI is largely used with NCC because Digitrax users had a limited ability to do this stuff using LocoNet. And for most people with moderate-sized layouts, the LocoNet solution was fine, and they already had it. But NCE users had less opportunity, and they tended to gravitate to CMRI because it's well supported and robust. So it works alongside NCE is probably the best way to describe it. And that's a very popular combination. Bruce Chubb, for example, and myself, we both use NCE and CMRI. Okay. Not going to bore you to death with all the little goodies in the telephone product line. There's all kinds of switch motors. This is a good example. Twin coil machines, the old big nasty ones that went snap and caused the lights to dim. We have a client, very nice gentleman, had a couple of, banker's boxes full of old twin coil machines. And he's thrifty and didn't want to throw them away and replace them because after all, they worked. So we ended up building a little piece of electronics that could drive them. No computer, has a hardware timer so that if it won't get stuck on, and cause your twin coil machine to overheat and start a fire. It also has some nice electrical wave shaping so that it doesn't cause electromagnetic pulse and all your neighbors' sensitive electronics to crap out like somebody set off a nuke 10 miles above you. But, fairly complicated board, but a good example of the kind of odd things we can handle. Here are MP motors. We talked about those. Let's see here. Here's a cool thing we do for train order boards. Semaphore controller with 2 servos, got pots to adjust the position of the servos, and then you simply put a signal in, essentially a ground, and say if you want it to go from red to green or red to yellow, or move it back. So this is a nice little board, and it's a pretty steady seller for us. Let's see. Here's another neat thing for timetable operation. A train is approaching an operator's position. In the real world, there would be a bell. You've probably heard the phrase, the guy's on your bell. It means a train's approaching. You may need to do something. So this has a set of optical detectors and a couple of relays to operate a bell or a buzzer or whatever you want to indicate it. Having been in the telephone call center business, what I think you really need is a chair with a Ford spark coil in it. So when the agent doesn't pick up and they're allotted 5 seconds, you can, give them a little encouragement. Get them to sit up a little straighter. We don't make that, by the way. No operators were harmed in making this product. LED replacements for traditional CTC lamps. The semaphore, yeah, that's on our Otter Creek asks, is the semaphore controller available? Yes, it's on the site. You can order it.
Yeah. And Seth, just to say this as well, and I don't know this is true with every one of your products, but with a lot of your products, you can buy either the kit or the assembled unit as well. So if you like putting things together, you can. If you want to be able to just plug it in and go, you can do that as well.
Absolutely. In fact, a great example of that is clubs. Very often a club will buy a couple of assembled ones, so they have them to test and characterize. And when they're done with their evaluation, they'll turn around and buy a bunch of bare boards. And, so you can do that. I generally don't sell kits of parts just because the labor in assembling and putting the kit together, I might as well build it for that.
I put up a thing on the bottom of the screen for anyone who's just joining us so that they understand this is a business that Seth runs. Seth is our guest at the bottom of the screen there, just below Heath. And if you're just joining us, Seth is talking about some of the products that are available on his website, modelrailroadcontrolsystems.com. Just wanted to make that clear because obviously Otter Creek came in a little bit later and was asking the question that had already been answered. But, people come in.
Way to call out Dennis there, John.
Oh, is that who that is?
Well, yeah,
no
the
calling
only
out.
dumb question is the question that didn't get asked.
Yeah,
so.
and it's not calling anybody out. It's just saying someone came in
joking.
later, didn't know what was going on. So
ask.
Yep.
Ask.
Yep.
I mean, this is for your benefit.
Yes, it is. All of it is.
Seth is not only the owner, but he also uses all these products as well.
Right.
That's pretty much true.
Kind of like the hair club for men.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like the product so much I bought it.
Yeah, I'm not just a president. I'm also a client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all sorts of community stuff, Jeff Bunz's projects that you see in MRH, a bunch of that stuff. So anyway, that's and if you want something that seems like it belongs in our product line and it's not there, ask. Chances are you're not the only one, and I may be working on that project already. That's happened a lot. Or it might be a great idea. And if you have something that you developed and you want to share, but man, you don't want to deal with PayPal and eBay and marketplaces and sales tax and shipping and fulfillment, I'm already doing that stuff. So give me a buzz. Okay, can we kill this slideshow?
Yeah.
So that's basically the Seth MRCS pitch. So fire away.
Yeah, if anybody has questions, this is a good time to put them in the chat. I know we do that all along, but if you have any specific questions, you can put them in there. It seems to me, Heath, like you might have some questions because I know you've been putting together a bunch of stuff, and I found out from Seth when I told him about this show. He's like, "Oh, I know Heath. He's one of my best customers." So
I don't know that I'm his best customer, but I have recently bought a couple things for him, specifically the turnout motors, as well as some of John Plocker's designs as well, which are some nice things. I think Seth also has a lot of great tools for testing, like the signals that you sell for like they're $2 a piece or something like that, that I can use just to sort of test things out on my layout. If somebody, so here's the question that I think might lead into other things, but technology makes a lot of people nervous. And even switching from DC to DCC makes a lot of people really nervous. What is a good pathway into expanding our layouts to include a little bit of this extra technology, and why might I want to add these little bits and pieces?
Well, that's a great question. So it depends a little bit on your era and your prototype, and you can be a freelancer. It's not like we don't talk to you if that railroad hasn't been documented inch by inch. Like the Rio Grande Southern fans, they can point at a tie on the roadbed and tell you it came from a tree named Ralph, and
they're probably right.
Oh, they do. But let's say you are, right? You're running a dark railroad in Colorado. There's no signals. But they would have had train order boards, right? Because you had to have some way to tell trains that they needed to, they had authority to proceed, or they needed to change what they were doing. And so you would have a semaphore, one of those little lamp type affairs that would rotate. So there would be some sort of a train order board. So something like that semaphore controller would be a great place to start. And it's a cool bit of animation. Another thing is many signaling systems, probably way more route miles of signaling system, were just basic signaling called automatic block signal system, or ABS. Then we're under CTC. So you don't need the computer and the full bi-directional signaling. Any train can go on any track at any time, and they're crossing back and forth at high speed like a Markland layout or the Northeast Corridor. I mean, you certainly can do that stuff, and a lot of the people who are into CTC, love to do it because it's just pushing the technology hard and an interesting challenge. But very often, you had any railroad after World War II that had more than about 6 trains a day, particularly if it was passenger, even an RDC or a Doodlebug or something, would have
So
had.
if I wanted to add, sorry to cut you off, but if I wanted to add like one semaphore just to kind of get into it, like, do I already need to have DCC and have JMRI set up and like all this stuff,
No.
or like can I just like buy one thing?
Yes. I mean that exactly. You can do exactly that. I have 2 stations, and each station has a semaphore, for train order, and so red is stop, yellow is catch the order on the fly, green is, no orders for you. You're clear. All you need for that is just a little toggle switch, at the dispatcher or operator's desk, and you can control that, and you don't need anything more. Now, you can integrate that into the full all singing, all dancing layout later if you want, but you don't need that to start. And like I say, the next step up would be simple ABS type signaling. We have ABS controllers that are 2 chips and a resistor pack. So, no computer, just very simple. You can debug it with a voltmeter. Basic soldering skills, no surface mount technology. Very, very easy to do. And, then on the other hand, if you want to do, 800 feet of main line, a station every 60 or 70 feet, block signals everywhere, we can support that also. But you don't need to do that. That's the thing. You can get in there and you can have some fun. An interlocking tower is another real interesting thing. Lots of small layouts have a crossing, even if the crossing really is just crossing the benchwork at a 30-degree angle and the foreign road is all of 30 inches. You put the tower there, right? It's visually very interesting, and you put the signals around it, and maybe you just set up a little Arduino program that periodically is running a timing loop, and a phantom train appears and sets your signals to stop. And if a train comes along, why they have to wait until the train goes away and then it comes back to green. Now you have all this interesting stuff on the layout. You have a little bit of animation, and you've gotten your feet wet. Are they compatible with LCC? No, we don't use LCC. You can use them in addition to LCC.
They're compatible in the sense that if you have JMRI set up, they can communicate with each other. So they're not incompatible, but they do not use the LCC communication bus.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah,
right? And there's no reason you can't have both different communication protocols on your layout.
Right. I mean, you probably read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe somewhere in your misspent youth. And you remember the debabbilizer, the little worm you stuck in your ear, and it would speak all the different languages in the world or in the universe. JMRI is the debabbilizer. It will speak CMRI, LocoNet, LCC, MQTT, as my late partner Chuck used to say, 57 Hudson. And, you can have an LCC layout, but maybe you want to talk to some device that its only interface is LocoNet or only interface is CMRI. well, that's fine. You can stick your 57 Hudson on your network, and LCC is quite happy to handle it. I'm sorry, JMRI is quite happy to handle it through whichever bus you want to use. So, it's fine. For most people, most layouts using LCC, it's just plumbing, and it's really no different than using any of these other standards.
Yeah. Anthony's asking whether you guys do the programming with Arduinos. I don't know if you want to get into I think you have a page where all the code's available, so people could, grab it and do it on their own. Or
we generally ship the stuff with the standard program, and you can download it. If you have Arduino IDE, which is an integrated development environment, it's free. The interface is typically a USB cable to whatever style of Arduino you're using. So you can certainly do it yourself. If you're buying it from me, and you want something a little different, I'll be happy to modify the parameters for you. If it gets to be a bit much, we might charge a little bit for it. But yeah, generally it's fine. I mean, the whole point of Arduino, Adriano.
I was going to say, you got the wrong guy.
Well, he was Italian. I mean, the great thing about Massimo Banzai, the guy who invented Arduino, it's a little single board computer. Nothing exciting about it. They'd been around for years before Arduino, and new ones come out every year. Whenever somebody has a new chip, they offer what they call an evaluation and development board, and it's functionally equivalent. But what Bonzi did is he standardized a design, and that was very inexpensive, and he pitched it at art students. The pun was Artduino.
Huh.
And this was for Italian conceptual artists who were doing what we would call animation. They were making sculptures that moved. And the brilliant thing was not specifying a one-board computer. I mean, thousands of engineers could do that in their sleep, or certainly by 10 o'clock in the morning. But he taught a bunch of Italian artists to program in C++ and didn't tell them. That was brilliant. Because if you can teach a bunch of Italian sculptors to program C++, you can teach a bunch of model railroaders who aren't really very different in terms of what they're trying to achieve to program. And he has this language he calls processing. Spoiler alert, it's C++.
Is technology your favorite part of model railroading?
Say again?
Sorry, is technology your favorite part of model railroading?
I think operations is my favorite part, but I love technology too. And, when you can do things like we've been talking about with the train order boards and the signaling systems, where you're using technology. Oh my God.
I was going to say something obscene just happened in the background.
This is Richard Brennan, who is the proprietor of TT West, who's the importer of our switch machines.
Hey, I know that guy.
I'm the guy causing problems for Seth Neumann, Richard Brennan, TT West. So we act solely as the importer from the Czech Republic, and Seth does all the retail. So it's not me, it's him.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah,
and if you want TT cars, if you're into that interesting scale that's a little bigger than N and small enough to actually get a lot of railroad in, Richard is your guy. So let's see, do we have... So we have it working. We don't have LEDs.
So TT West is the scale. TT
TT,
the West
scale
hemisphere part of the world. Okay, nice.
Yeah. So let's see. It's really popular in Central Europe. There's at least a dozen or two of us here in North America. That's me. And so the big event will be.
Did you leave that on a bus seat? Are you looking for a?
Yeah,
I found it in the restroom.
Personal injury attorney.
He picked that up in a bathroom someplace.
Yeah, I was in the restroom.
So the big gathering is in Vancouver at the Vancouver Train Expo, where we have what we call TT Tracks modules, and that's where all the Canadian and American TT guys get together and run some trains. But it is not a coincidence that my wife is from Budapest, because in Central Europe, you can get TT almost anywhere.
And Seth is converting his whole layout to TT scale
Absolutely. No,
Oh, well, I mean, Seth,
HOM is the quickest conversion. That would be 12 millimeter track with the HO scale. But so I'm here only for the switch motors at this point. So I'm sorry, it's Heath?
Heath, yes.
Heath,
Yep.
Richard Brennan. Pleasure
Nice
to meet you.
so hey,
Have
Richard,
you got? Can you bring up the?
yeah, we have that. There it is.
So we were waving switch motors around, and here is the long-awaited switch motor demo. And it's this motor here. Whoops, can we see it?
Yeah, it's not a very large portion of the screen. Is there a way to raise your camera so we can see a little bit more of everything?
We can do that.
That might help. Of course, now now the cutting board's crooked again. Oh darn!
Oh no!
Yeah, I'll deal with it.
So the connection here is that the guy who makes
Make them bigger, John.
Oh,
the guy
I
who
can
makes
do that.
TT cars
Yeah.
in Prague also brought out this line of switch motors for the European market. And I said, well, how about sending those our way? And so the rest is history. And with Seth's connection as being able to do signaling and switching and all that kind of stuff, it seemed a natural fit. So this shows it mounted upside down underneath, and there's the throw. It's this is exactly the footprint of a tortoise, but it's only it's less than an inch deep underneath rather than the 2 and change that a tortoise. It's not a stall motor. It is actually a CAN motor and a gear train and a series of keyboard rated micro switches all in that little green box. So that's
I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, not being a fan of anything, why would I want a tortoise if I could get that and it's so much smaller? And aren't the MP10s cheaper too?
Yes.
That's what I
because
thought.
you would use a tortoise because you like 1963 printed circuit board technology,
Right.
which
I
if
get
you
what-
look at,
yeah,
they
I
have,
get
they have open wipers on the circuit board is their switching technology.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I'm just asking the question honestly, because I don't have a preference. I don't have a layout, so it doesn't matter to me. But
I think, to be fair, Tortoise was the first slow motion machine that was generally easy to use, and it was probably simpler and easier than, in the old days, there was a switch machine that was somewhat similar conceptually, used a CAN motor and a bunch of contacts called the Folgerex. It was also imported by PFM. And you do see them on some older layouts. And, for example, La Mesa Club uses them and still has a bunch, which gives you an idea of the longevity and solidity of the product. But it had exposed contacts and it was kind of expensive and a little bit of a pain to install. And tortoises were frankly a little cheaper and a little easier, and they were slow, so you weren't using the old twin coil machines, which, would pound the heck out of the switches. They very often eventually ripped the stock rails right off the ties. And
so those are the ones that just click over. They just go.
Yeah, they went bang. I mean, really loud bang. They're little solenoids, and they drew tremendous amount of power. You typically need these giant capacitive discharge power supplies, and they were electrically noisy. And of course, once people started using computers around their layouts, it got into everything and caused all kinds of problems. So they became less popular. And, the Tortoise was a good solution for its day. I think the MP is a better solution, and our customers seem to think so.
The enabling technology on this was really the advent of low-cost, good, small CAN motors rather than an open frame to drive the gear train. So the manufacturer builds N-scale engines, so he became familiar with the CAN motors available in China. And so if you look inside, it's about a 10 or 12 millimeter CAN motor driving a gear train, driving a cam, 3-lobe cam for the micro switches, and a little geared hub for the adjustable throw, which is why I was delayed getting here, because I had to readjust the throw internally to match this piece of track that I had mounted there.
Anyway, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Had a thought about that, but it's now blown away.
Well,
I'm sure
someone's asking the question, if you don't mind me directing you to the bottom of the screen there.
Oh, yes.
And
That was what I was thinking about.
Oh,
So,
okay.
David, that's a great question. How long will these last? When Richard first got me some samples, before I even agreed to handle the product, I hooked one of these things up to a function generator and just was, putting a signal high for 10 seconds and low for 10 seconds and using a little driver to drive the motor. And after about 3 weeks, I think we'd gotten up to 70,000 or 75,000 cycles. I forget what the count was. And I got bored and needed the space on the workbench. And then I sat down and figured it out. And I said, well, what if you had the bull switch on the yard lead? In other words, the first switch that comes off the main. This is a switch that gets used a lot during an op session. And you operate it every week for 6 hours. You could go about 25 years before you get to my 70,000 cycles. Now, it didn't fail at 70,000. I just got tired of listening to it. So my guess is, yeah, decades. Because in reality, even if you're the yard master, and that's one of my favorite jobs after dispatching, and thank you, Deep Run. We'll be looking for your order on the system.
I think I heard the email come in on your audio.
Oh, yeah, you heard that bong. That's great.
Yeah.
Love those bongs. So, love those bongs.
Don't
Good
respond,
stuff.
John. Don't respond.
Somehow I knew you were going to go there.
And the actual motivation for MTB bringing out the tortoise footprint switch motor is that tortoises are starting to get to that point in their maturity where they've been used a bunch, and internally that open switch mechanism, along with some other internal parts, tends occasionally to fail. So there are people who are wanting to change out to something newer and better. There are also people who are looking at the second deck of a layout and going, that is not going to fit. It's not going to fit my helix. It's not going to fit, in the yard over the yard. And this does offer, you can always offset switches and use a crank system to throw the switches. But this allows you to put them where you would have thought they belonged and get away with it.
Yeah. And
Can you control these turnouts with the same devices you would use to control a tortoise? Like, do you need
most of them? Yes.
or anything?
Some of the tortoise controllers use what's called an operational amplifier. Op amp is the phrase that electronics geeks use, and those don't have enough current. Now, we do make an adapter if that's the only way you can get at it, but generally the control is simpler because rather than having to flip the power over, you can just do it with a single pole double throw switch. So it's actually a cheaper and simpler control system. The difference is that a MP motor will draw about 150 milliamps for 2 or 3 seconds while it's moving, whereas a tortoise will draw 20 milliamps forever. So it's just during that 2-second period, you need to be able to supply a little bit more current than you can get through the op amp system. And I've got an application note called Wiring and Application Control Note on the switches and controllers page. And, again, take a look at that, download it. If you have a question, just reach out and we'll be happy to explain it. And, in some cases, people have just said, I have this controller. I have no idea. I've lost the documentation. And just send it to me. And if you buy a motor from me, I'll ship it back, at my expense. Otherwise, I'll ship it back at your expense. Usually the answer is, if you can't do anything with it, it's useless. So just throw it out. But most of the time we get them working. It's not that bad. And there's, somebody just came to me at a case of DigiKeys decoders, and DigiKeys is since apparently I've been sold or gone out of business. I'm not really up on European electronics suppliers. Well, Otter Creek asked a question. So several on the same power supply might be an issue. Well,
So
probably
let me just
not.
give you a little bit more background. So Otter Creek is planning to use LCC on his layout. So he specifically wants to use the RR circuits.
Oh, he's
for his
compatible
machine
with
control.
us. Dick Bronson is RR Circuits. Great guy. We work together. We actually resell some of his stuff. I just as an aside and just, can't say enough nice things about Dick and great customer service and always being willing to help and do the right thing for the hobby. Totally great guy. Chuck and I and Dick used to have lunch every so often. And this idea of these small nodes, 16-bit nodes that are good for one end of a controlled siding, that was just something we all wanted to do and we worked with here. Anyway, Dick's stuff will support MP motors. And, in the odd case that you really needed to throw a couple at a time, he's got some tricks to handle that. Generally, the answer is just don't run them all at once. Just sequence it. He's got a lot of onboard processing power and you can just tell it to queue them up if that's what you're really concerned about. But they work fine.
Yeah, so Otter's follow-up question was about routing, and you're saying like your solution is just programming a small delay on each motor as they go.
Yeah, and that's what you would actually see on a real railroad because they'd have the same issue.
They wouldn't throw them all at the same time necessarily anyway, because the train can't be on all of them at the same time anyway.
No, but you might set up a route through an interlocking plant, which I think is what Otter Creek is asking about. That's a legitimate concern.
Yep.
But again, if you actually watch one of those things working, you'll see that it runs one after the other, and there's...
Would the power booster circuit work for that, or be an issue because you have multiples?
There's lots of things. You can use relays as repeaters and an external supply. I mean, there's lots of fairly simple and inexpensive solutions that would take care of that. But generally, any of the RR Circuits products will work fine.
James from Dundas Junction is asking where he can buy the MTB motors. He lives up in Ontario, Canada.
I just shipped 3 cases of MP10s to a guy in Trail, British Columbia this morning. So yeah, I do quite a bit of business in Canada. It typically takes 2 weeks with Canada Post. But unless you're in Quebec, it works really well. They seem to lose every third package in Quebec. Something about Q, because we have the same problem with Queensland, Australia. The rest of Australia is fine. You want to go to Oz or New Zealand, no problem. I ship quite a bit. I would say 20-25% of my business is non-US English speaking countries.
One of the first MP customers was the Delta Club in South British Columbia.
Well, I tell you, I took I think the second batch of MP1s, which was the first product, Richard brought over by hand one day, and I was leaving for the Van Rails operations meet in British Columbia the next morning. So I threw them in my bag, stupidly, not realizing that, of course, Canadian Customs is going to ask, did you bring anything to sell? So I just conveniently forgot. And I set these things out at the registration table with the sign, I think they were $20 American at the time. And I came back 10 minutes later and I had a box full of cash and no motors. So
speaking about carrying stuff to sell stuff, are you gonna visit us at Amherst this year?
I probably won't, given my margins, I'd have to sell $30,000 worth of stuff at Amherst to make.
That sounds like a challenge. I don't know. We should ask the Northeast Model Railroaders. Do you think we can?
Well, we'll ask Vita to send us a container full of motors, and we'll just drag our container in where our booth should be and see how fast we can convert the boxes into piles of cash.
Cut a hole in the side and just hand stuff out the window.
You know, our friends at Class 1 had their, nice new loads for their flat car at the NMRA convention, and Stephen and Mike were literally just ripping boxes open, pulling the loads out, and Cynthia and somebody else were writing up orders as fast as they could, and it was they couldn't keep up. Every time they'd bring up, particularly that big transformer, at $70 a piece, they were flying off the shelves. It was worth your life to be in the way out in front of their booth. So maybe we could do that with MPs at Amherst.
So did you select all of the different electronic stuff in your layout, and then, what you're selling? Did you select it and then try and figure out how you could use it for operations, or did you have a problem that you wanted to solve and went out and found a solution to solve it?
Most of this stuff is organic. In other words, there was a problem that either we had or somebody else had. For example, we handle some modular signaling system stuff. That's a standard used for simple non-computer controlled signaling. Another good solution for that kind of problem that was developed primarily, I think, by the Fremo community, but other modular groups use it. So, they had a problem. They solved it themselves. Once they had the board, they, basically the guy who made it didn't really want to be in the sales business, but, his friends were frequently pinging him, and it used our detector, what we call the CPOD, control point occupancy detector. And, it made sense to just offer it. So again, the MSS crossover is a steady seller. And again, if you're building a module and at 5:00 on Saturday afternoon, you go, oh man, I got a meet next week and I need another crossover, I'll get that order and ship it out Monday morning. So these
you
are
ever
all
go to operation sessions looking for problems?
Oh no, they
Problems to solve.
come up spontaneously.
I'm trying to use it. I went the
Oh,
wrong way.
I went the wrong way. Don't do
Sounds
that.
like
We
someone
can
turned the
actually
volume
turn
up on the phone
off.
over there, Heath.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is Siri joining
Richard
this?
is helping.
Yes. What did I break this time?
I don't know. Let's see. Well,
I just bricked his phone.
What did you do to my phone?
I just held the button down.
Which button?
The one that messed
The one that
everything up.
activates Siri.
We won't be interrupted now.
No one can stop us now. Here. I think I have StreamYard stop. No.
Sydney is amused that the tech guys are the ones having a problem with the phone.
I have no idea what he did.
I'm not an Apple user. That's the problem.
I don't know.
I pressed a button.
He pressed a button.
It sounded like the volume started going up, so he probably pressed the volume button on the side.
Yes, I think he did. What did
Yeah.
you just drop here?
The strange thing in all of this is that for quite the longest time, I still had the picture on the in our basement. You know what that means, right? In the what do you call that little thing at the bottom there on StreamYard? Yeah,
The view picker.
something like that.
Well, where you either got it as a banner across the bottom or you got a set of tiles on the side.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I have StreamYard turned off.
I think it is. Yeah. So if
So
you need to show anything else in the Foldio, you'll have to turn it back on. But it seemed like we were done with the Foldio.
I think we're done with the Foldio, and we can even. Could you turn the lights off on the Foldio? I don't know. I'm a little concerned about Richard with switches.
Yeah, after that last episode, are you sure you want to let him do that? Look, he's trying to figure
Lights
it
are
out.
going on now. Lights are going off.
The lights are going higher, not lower.
Where's on each side? There you go.
I was gonna say, Seth, just turn the camera on Richard, and we'll all have entertainment watching him try to turn the light off.
Oh well, it's pretty scary.
So James from Dundas is trying to figure out which MP motors he should get. And I just want to point out, you do have a demo kit where you can buy one of each. But if if somebody just wants to try one, do
Oh,
you have
yeah.
any suggestions on which one to get for what purpose?
Yeah, sure. So there's three flavors. The MP1 is the small one, has a single contact. So generally that'd be used for frog switching. And if there's no need for, a remote position indicator LED or any kind of input to a computer system, that's a good solution. It's a little less expensive. It's a little bit smaller. Of course, no sooner had Vita come out with that than people started saying, well, I want a second contact because I need to report position or control a position indicator, maybe a little ground signal next to the switch to show you which way it's thrown if the switch is up at eye level. And then, also it'd be nice to have a connector. So he came out with the MP5. An MP5 is a nice little device. It has this odd little push-in connector. And then the MP10 was an attempt to North Americanize it by giving it the same footprint as the Tortoise. And frankly, the connector on the MP5 wasn't the world's greatest ever. So he went to what's called the Phoenix connector, which is a very nice connector with screws, and you can make your screw connections to the connector and then just slide it into the Tortoise, and it lies a little lower. Now, as it turns out, the MP5 is pretty much at end of life. Vita's had some supply issues with some of the components, so he's reinvented it as the MP4, which from the user perspective looks like an MP5 with the same nice 9-pin connector. So now the question really comes down to the MP5 is a little bit smaller. The MP10 has the same footprint as a Tortoise. If you were going along and replacing a bunch of Tortoises or had jigs and everything you were doing was set up for Tortoises, the MP10 would be a little better choice. I expect the MP4 will be the same price or within a few cents. And Richard tells me, our first several cases are on their way, so we should have those ready to ship by 1st of November. And I'm pretty excited about that because frankly, the connector has been a mixed blessing. It's nice because it's screwless and you can pull it in and out, but Heath can tell you it creates some mechanical problems of its own. Yeah. So Vanna here is showing you the MP10 with the Phoenix type connector. And you're familiar with this if you've got a NCE power command station. There's a 4-pin version of this. Very nice, very easy to work with. And the MP5, I think there was one over here in the goodie bag. But do I have the connector for it? Yes, I do.
It has what we euphemistically call a Euro connector.
And it's a little, this is going away. Probably don't want to spend that much time on it. But it has this sort of polarized connector, except you can force it in upside down. Ask me how I know. Take a look in my returns bin. And the problem, as you can see, is that it really sticks out. And
it's big.
And it's big, and it's kind of long. And it's also a bear to pull out straight once it's mounted under the layout. So, and of course, it's just a unique connector. You can't get board mounted receptacles for it or anything like that. So it's people who use it love it, but it's got some issues. Anyway, what we're going to have is one that looks like this. Up.
The other direction.
Other direction. I'm sorry, this thing is reversed. It's not quite a mirror. But it would look like this, and the whole thing is, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch longer, but much more compact overall, because you can see once it's fit in, it looks more like this. So anyhow, I think that's going to be the real winner going forward, but the MP1 is certainly still serviceable. There might maybe be a version 3 connectorized version at some point, but as a product manager, I have to tell you, if you don't have the shipping documents in hand, don't believe it. And even if you do, maybe wait till you open the first case. So I may have even spoken too soon, but I would think that's good.
There's a question about using them for control for gates, crossing gates.
Yeah, actually,
like it would work for that.
You can do that. We have a little. If you look on our website under Arduino Nano project boards, you'll have a number of things like that servo controller and the approach indicator I was telling you about, the guy that goes bong. We also have a grade crossing controller. And, it's very simple. There's lots of great Arduino grade crossing sketches. In fact, I think almost anybody who's an electronics geek, the first time they heard about Arduino, it was screaming grade crossing in their ear because it'll control servos to move the things up and down.
Or MPs.
And it can control MPs. So yeah, you can use MPs for that. You can use servos, lots of good ways to do it. So sure.
There are some accessory parts for the driving end of the motors that can be attached to bell cranks and other automation elements. So that has been thought of by the manufacturer. He's not providing them in the same quantity he used to, but they are available.
They are available. And, Richard really, said the magic word there. If you're trying to do things like grade crossings or semaphores that aren't directly over where you're mounting your controller, the radio control section of your hobby shop is Mecca, because they have bell cranks, they have choke cables, they have all sorts of stuff. And it's designed to take quite a bit of abuse if you've ever seen the RC guys out flying, and G-forces and all that good stuff. So, absolutely, and these things work. And of course, one of the really nice things is these are linear motion, right? Yeah. There's no rotary thing where the throw bar is popping up in the middle and snagging on your glad hands or any of that nonsense. It's just back and forth. And if you install it so that you can get at the front, you get two great features. One is this little screw in the middle controls the operating pin, so you can raise or lower the height without having to get in with the Dremel and nick the top of the rails. Ask me how I know. The other thing is these two little screws can be adjusted so you can slide the whole affair a little bit to the left or the right. And if you pull the front off, you can get in and actually change the throw. It comes factory set at 6 millimeters. Generally, if you use it with 039 music wire, that's fine in N and HO. But, you might be running a Garden Railroad or O-scale and want a little wider throw. So you can get up to 12 millimeters if you really want. And you can get down to 3. But I frankly, I wouldn't mess with trying to get it exactly lined up. I would get it more or less in line side to side and then use the music wire and let that suck up the slack. And then that gives you a little bit of pressure. So you kind of have the best of the stall motor without the constant current draw. Anyway, just, a little personal opinion. Now, Murphy says, of course, if I mount the switch motor here, the joist is here, and none of that is of any use. But if you can keep the nose free, it's very easy to adjust.
Sounds like we're going to have to do a more in-depth thing, which I think was the whole idea with that little demonstrator that Richard built there. So look for that. I think we'll do something, Seth, sometime like a spotlight on the MP10 or something. I think that would be a nice.
Would be awesome. Yeah, and maybe we'll have some, MP4s to show you, and
we'll have a complete line of products here, and probably a couple of weeks down the road.
Yeah.
Box is supposed to go out Monday.
That'll be a great excuse to hang out one of these days in the near future.
Absolutely.
So, talking of excuses to hang out, I think the last time I saw you, Seth, was at the op session over at Ray Turner's on Saturday.
Oh, wasn't that fun? No, it was Thursday, wasn't it?
Whatever it was. It was Thursday. You're right. Sorry. See, I was so excited. I forgot what day it was. And we were going to talk about ops. I think we could just keep talking about this technology stuff for another hour and a half before we get into ops, but maybe we should get into ops a little bit.
Let's move to ops.
Let's move to ops.
I will say, as a little bit of a transition into operations, I will say that the thing that I enjoy the most about the technology is what it adds to operations. And my goal in building out my current layout is to use the technology to add things like space, time, distance, movement, changes in lighting, all of that kind of stuff, so that
Absolutely.
the operator feels like they are engaged in the environment of the layout and what I'm trying to create. And that's what I have really enjoyed about operations is I'm not watching the trains. I'm actually involved in the story that's happening. I'm involved in, moving things around the layout. So yeah, for me, that's why I'm so into the technology. That's why there's no track laid behind me, because I want to make sure, well, I think of technology as the nerves and the veins and everything of the layout. And you've got to build that from the inside out for your layout to work well. So I am building this layout for operations. There's going to be a lot of technology in it. That Sydney asked a great question about technology and like how it adds to the prototype and stuff like that. My goal is when you come and operate on my layout, you are not going to notice the technology at all. It's just going to be so a part of the story and so a part of, what you're doing, that it'll just seem seamless, appear seamless.
That's so true. And just let me throw a little bit of, my philosophy, I guess you will, about operations. But so operations is modeling the jobs of the railroad, right? I mean, that's really what we're doing. We're modeling being a railroad. And like you say, we're participating, not watching from afar. So easy to get in the helicopter view and we're up on Olympus watching the mortals run. But we're not. We're method acting. We're taking on a role. And we're not only are we expecting anybody who's around to suspend disbelief, but we ourselves want to suspend disbelief. So think very much of this almost as a performance, and we're participating. We and the trains are the actors, and the technology is the DCC running our locomotives. The technology may be a signaling system lighting up the iconic signals that we recognize from all the books about our prototype. But we don't want to be programming and dinking. Well, some of us do, but when we're operating, we expect that to work. So I'm the dispatcher. I want to be looking at a panel that looks and feels to me that what a dispatcher on that district in that day would have used. When I'm running the train, I want to be, moving through beautiful scenery and structures that represent the area I'm modeling. I expect to see the right signal displaying the right aspect at the right place. Because now I'm able to suspend disbelief. Yes, I really am on the New York Central Hudson Division. Yes, I really am on the UP Oakland sub, because I see the right stuff, and that includes all of these, lighting and as much animation as we can add. That's not gimmicky, but adds to that realism and allows us to suspend disbelief and fully immerse ourselves in what we're doing. So anyway, you were saying.
No, absolutely. And that's why I think this conversation of technology and operations fits so well together, because they really do enhance and build on top of each other. And in my opinion, aren't things to be afraid of. Both technology and operations are things that you hear a lot of new people being nervous about and avoiding to some extent. And you know, for me, I say jump in. I mean, you have people like Seth that'll talk to you on the phone and help you out about whatever. I've called Dick Bronson up. I've never bought anything from Dick Bronson, and I think I talked to him for a half hour almost on the phone. So it's, you know, there are people out there that are just so excited about technology, about sharing operations, about sharing what they do, that they're willing to, you know, help out just, you know, just for asking. So yeah, I don't know if we want to get into, I mean, John's been talking a lot about operations being this newfound passion. Well, not newfound, but for the last couple of years being a new passion for him. Operations for me, extremely new. When I was building out this room, I talk about it all the time. My biggest headache was figuring out how could I get a loop in this room. My door swings in. So what was I going to do? You know, this isn't a good spot for a model railroad. And it was all just because, like, that's how I saw model railroads. They were, you know, some tracks in a circle with minimal scenery, with minimal, you know, technology. And, you know, if you wanted to change the train, you would pick it up off the track, put it in its box, take another train out of its box and put it on the track. And finding out that there are these people in their basements and their attics, in their bedrooms, building these transportation worlds was just eye-opening.
I don't know if you remember, Heath. Sorry, Seth. I don't know if you
go
remember,
ahead.
Heath, but thank you. I remember being in one of your live streams, and you were really worried about trying to figure out how to do a loop, and there were people in there saying, "Oh, well, where are you going to put your helix and all this other stuff?" And I'm like, "Why don't you just do a point to point? You could have a lot more fun." I don't know if you remember that, but I was thinking along those lines even back then, and I'm not sure that it registered at the time, probably because you were still in that whole circular.
I couldn't conceive
paradigm.
it.
Yeah.
I in my head, the idea of a point-to-point layout was, well, there was no point in having one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the idea of a train going, you know, one direction and coming back again. Like, why would you do that? That's not logical. Trains run in circles, don't they? I mean, every train you see at every train show runs in a circle. If you stand there, that train will come back to you if you just wait for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
but
then
it
I
doesn't
started-
usually work that way trackside, does it?
No, not usually.
You know, the interesting thing to think about too, though, is what are you seeing when you go to a train show, or what are you seeing when you go to a museum that has a layout for public display? It's a public display. And I think most people in the public who go to see a display want trains running in a circle because they can just hold their kids up and the kids can marvel at the trains going by repeatedly. Because kids, I mean, if you, I have kids, so I know that at a certain age, they will want to watch the same show over and over and over and over and over and over. That's why DVDs were so great, because VHS tapes actually wore out and DVDs didn't. And we would have watched a show 100 times in a year or less of the same show. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's
the wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round.
Sure, and you play it over and over and over. So the audience for operations, I think, is, well, I like to think, is a little bit more sophisticated than that, because we're trying to simulate something that happens in real life, whereas a public display is just trying to entertain kids generally.
And I would say it's different. I wouldn't say a layout built for operations is necessarily more sophisticated, but that the people are more sophisticated, because there are some layouts out there where the person that owns that layout is more into scenery, or they're more into like some other aspect of model railroading. I will say people that are into operations probably have been at the bottom of more rabbit holes than some other people in different areas of model railroading. But yeah, we're probably a little more masochistic, a little more, like struggling with our trains a little bit more than some other people. But
I don't think so, Heath. I mean, I understand.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, everybody rat holes on something, but what's interesting though, you raised a point, about originally not being able to conceptualize a layout that didn't allow for circle running or display running. Mine does it. It has a little piece of track that very rarely is used for anything other than the odd. We're open for the local NMRA division meet and people come by, but so we put a train in orbit and let it run. I mean, certainly you can use electronics to do fancier things than that, but for display running, that's generally okay. But what I find is really interesting, I've been involved also with a layout design SIG. I was president for a long time and still on the board. And very often, we'll help somebody design a layout. We offer free consultation at the national conventions, for example, and they'll want to have this loop. And I've had several times the experience of, we help the guy design the layout, or the couple in this one case, and they were very insistent on wanting this, this display loop, and it was cute. But when you actually go over there, and he had gotten into operations and we were running, and it's nice layout, ran well, had a very pleasant, day running at one of the operating meets. And so I said, well, what about that? What about that loop? And he said, well, when the grandkids were young, it was great. Then the grandkids got to be 7 or 8, and watching things run around circles wasn't nearly as interesting. And at that point, we'd run it maybe at Christmas time that way, because the loop would poke out into the house. So, what goes on? What do you do? Do you ever run that? As well, occasionally to run in a new locomotive, it's nice to be able to run the loop.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing. But generally, I never run the layout between sessions. And if I do, it's to back stuff into staging and reset for the next one. And Tony Custer's, like people say, well, what do you do? He said, well, I don't know. I mean, the whole point of the layout is to see the little world come alive, and that takes the crew. No crew, no world. Not very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think your whole perspective on the purpose of the layout and what you want to do and what you feel is the layout being alive and running changes when you start to operate. And I mean, I remember running at Bruce Chubb's once, and I think Bruce and Janet, who is I think since passed, were probably well into their 70s at this point, and he must have been 30 operators. This was in that Grand Rapids convention in 2012 maybe. And, we're all doing our thing, running trains, running the various dispatchers' consoles. And here are Bruce and Janet walking through the layout, big childlike grins, holding hands, walking through this layout, just, sucking in the experience of the whole thing running, and, just, this little world running by itself. And, everything was well in their creation, and they were so happy.
I think something you just said is really interesting as well, in that sometimes operations is about the layout owner, or as an individual, right? Operations can be as the layout owner, having people come over, or even just operating by yourself, and the enjoyment of being the layout owner, seeing your layout come alive. And then the other side of operations is being the operator and getting to experience all these other layouts that people have built, which right now, that's the side I'm on, because I don't have a layout. The side I'm on is trying to get invites to as many layouts as I can, walk up to,
Well, you've
as a
met Phil
strange
and Dave,
person.
so you know the people to talk to.
I know, but it's like as a strange person, you're walking up to people saying, "Hey, I heard you had an amazing layout. Will you invite me over to your layout?" It's
Well, just tell them I sent you, and then
Yeah.
they'll put you on their blacklist forever.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't name drop Seth. They might not have the reputation you think. That may not be the flex you want.
No, they're really good guys. They
I
really
want to
are.
chime in here for a second about the whole idea of layout owners wanting to see the world come alive. I've talked to a lot of layout owners doing my layout videos, and every single ops-based layout, they bring that up. It's like, I don't operate, but I love watching everybody else operate. It is the most fun thing ever. And I mean, there are some model railroads that they're modeling an area and an era where you might have 2 or 3 trains a day, but they have 8 or 10 operators running the thing to its capacity, past its capacity, because it's fun and everybody has a great time. And at least to me, the other observation I've had in the time that I've been operating is it's fun. Yes, the trains are cool. Yes, the layouts are great. And it's really fun to operate the train and trying to do that whole role play, because that's really what it is. But more than that, it's a social event and a great excuse to hang out. I was just mentioning when I was making my clumsy segue to talk about operations, how I just saw Seth last week at Ray Turner's. And I got to tell you, in case you didn't notice, Seth, we start out sitting down under that little canopy that he has, and we end up sitting down under that little canopy and just BSing. And to me, that's as good as the operations.
Well, let's tell your viewers a little bit about Ray Turner's, because Ray has a wonderful layout. It's fairly mature. He's probably been running it for 15, 20 years from what he said. And it's a garden railroad. Now, he's in the foothills above San Jose, California, with a spectacular view. And, we are blessed here to have probably 270 beautiful days a year. And, you go out there, you put on your, long sleeve sun shirt, the kind of technical gear that's rated in SPF, and
your
big floppy hat, and sunscreen for everything that's exposed. And you come out and follow your train around. And let's see, I think I was running with Jim Radke, and Jim and I both own HO railroads, fairly modern era. And this is kind of funky Rio Grande inspired stuff. Calls itself the Mystic Mountain Railroad. And we had a great time. We just went out and switched and switched and switched, and the principles are all the same. But, one of the things, again, having been involved with some of the organizations of model railroading and, dealing with the demographics of model railroading, which, happily we've got some younger guys like Heath and John, but, the question is, how do you get people involved and how do they stay involved? And one of the things that happens is, I think a lot of lone wolves kind of come and go. They're in the hobby. They may also be plastic modelers, but they don't share it very much. And, they don't generally have a lot of friends in the hobby. The great thing about ops is you come for the ops session, but you meet a lot of other people who are operators, and you can't have a session without other people. So you get involved with the group, and, this week we're at so-and-so's, and that week we're at so-and-so's. And pretty soon somebody's getting a group together to go and visit the people over in Portland or Sacramento or Phoenix or Salt Lake or wherever it is. And, so we have the guys' weekends out. And, I think you come for the ops and you stay for the friendships, because an awful lot of these people, have become friends. They have similar interests to you, and you generally find out a lot of them are people you really like. They have often similar backgrounds. Very often their wives are into similar things. So we have a lot of friendships, most of us, that, go beyond model railroading, even that came out of operations. And Sid has a question up. Are we using obsessions.com? Well, that's Eric's site, and it's very nice. And if you're looking for a nice automated system to do your signups for Obsessions, it's great. And he also has pretty good support for a meet. So if you're organizing a new meet and you don't already have your own scheme for people registering and assigning layouts and setting up carpools and all that good stuff, that's a nice tool.
Yeah.
We have a tool that Bob Jacobson of JMRI fame built for us for the 2011 NMRA convention and has continued. So we use it for Bay Rails, which is our Bay Area operating meet. Sound Rails uses it. I'm trying to remember, at least one other regular operating meet uses it. So it's a nice tool. And the great thing is there's enough infrastructure. There's at least one list. I used to manage one and it kind of went away with Yahoo, but there's a new one on Groups.io that Eric White of right, is it Eric White is one of them is the editor. One of the Erics is the editor of MR, and the other is the editor of the OpSig magazine. Both really good guys.
Yeah, Eric White is RMC, and Eric Smith is OpSig, I think.
Eric Smith. Okay,
Smith,
so Eric is
definitely OpSig.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Well, I want to mention something here because, boy, I didn't even really think about this ahead of time, Seth, but this is a great opportunity, I think, to plug the Bay Area Layout Design and Operations Weekend, because one of the things that people often have asked on this show or other shows that I've done on Saturday mornings about model railroading on this channel is, how do I get invited to ops? How do I get into it? How do I find out? Because it sounds like fun. I want to do it. And one way, of course, is to find a club in your area. Like we're really lucky. We have Silicon Valley Lines, which is an operations-based club. And we also have closer to the North Bay, the Carquinez Model Railroad Society that's in Crockett, and who also does regular op sessions. But
Cal Central too.
Right, Cal Central. I didn't even think about that, but they do regular op sessions as well. They're a little harder to crack probably than the other two, but the point is sometimes there are clubs, and if there are clubs, inevitably at some point they will have an open house that you can get invited to, or it's open so you can just show up and express your interest. 9 times out of 10, anybody who's into operations and hears that you're interested, they'll bend over backwards to help you get into it because they think you'll really enjoy it. But there are also sometimes other events, and one such event is the thing that I just mentioned a second ago, the Bay Area Layout Design and Operations Weekend, which is something that, Seth, I think you've been doing for a number of years now, where it's really geared. Now, it's geared really for anybody, but specifically it's geared to get new people in and to let them operate on layouts that are fun to operate or welcoming or make it easy for new people to learn and make mistakes, without ruining the op session or something like that. That's something to mention. Sydney posted the link on the screen there and also in our chat. I don't know.
Oh, did she? Okay. Oh, there we go. I was
It's
just
on
looking for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on screen now.
Which is a new website for us for this year. And thanks to Sid and Robert Bowditch for getting that running. Yeah. So, one of the, well, this goes back a ways, but without boring you to death with a lot of history, although I think actually the history included would be a nice topic. I'd love to get myself and Dave Adams and perhaps Cliff, who's now doing some of the program stuff, on one of these in the future. But the format of this thing, and there are others in other parts of the country, is we have a day of clinics which are talking about operations and layout design, and we usually have a layout design challenge, and we have some tours. But on the Sunday of the meet, we have op sessions that are open. Yeah, just 1 second.
Sorry, we're going to go over to Sprouts.
Okay.
Back, and then
All right.
we'll go over
Okay, good. Sorry, I have in-laws in here, and there's activities.
It sounded like a
which
very
are fun.
important call, actually.
So we have these op sessions, and the op sessions are aimed at new operators. There are certainly going to be experienced operators there, the owners, and enough people to help you out. And any ops who are around who want to can certainly sign up. But the focus is that it's open to anybody. And there's always this concern that I'll go to an op session and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'll screw it up for everybody else, or I'll make a fool out of myself, or I'll be seen as less than knowledgeable in front of somebody who, I highly respect in the hobby, and that will be bad. And what we're trying to do is say, look, come here. This is aimed at people who have less experience to get you comfortable with it. There's freedom to fail. We won't let you wreck anything. Somebody will be looking over your shoulder if you want, and once you're doing okay, we'll step back and let you fly on your own. And it's a great opportunity to get into it, and all the owners want bigger crew lists. So if you show interest and an obvious willingness to try and do it the way it's intended to be done, and respect the game that's being played and try to learn the rules, everybody's happy to help you out, and they'll invite you back to a regular session. I mean, they may pair you up with a more experienced operator, but what a great way to learn. And honestly, the railroads, until very recently, it was totally a apprenticeship, make you learny kind of operation. So it works great.
Being paired up with somebody too, that's the way railroads
Heath,
work.
Can't hear you. Heath,
you can't hear me? Can you hear me, John?
I can hear you.
Did
It's
I
fine.
lose my sound?
I think Seth must have lost his audio.
Uh-oh. John can hear me, Seth.
I'm giving him sign language. Seth lost his audio, I think.
All right, where's my mic? No, I'm muted.
Oh.
No,
Well,
we can hear you,
We
Seth.
can hear you. You just
hear
can't
us.
hear us.
Looks good here.
Can you hear us at all? He can't hear us. Let me give him a call on the phone.
We'll edit this out and post again. But while
We'll fix it in post.
while John is
You having fun with me?
while John is messaging Seth, I'll say the way railroads work is there's a conductor and an engineer that are running a train. So
There's a button here that says having issues.
Here, maybe I'll just send Seth a text message. That might work better because I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time multitasking. Oh, this will probably work. He's gonna tune out and tune back in probably. Sorry, Heath, you were saying.
No, all good. I was gonna say that when you are a new operator and you go to somebody's layout, they will generally pair you up with somebody more experienced. And in my case, in most cases, the way you work with that other person is they would be the conductor and you would be the engineer.
Right.
So they would be pointing out like, hey, like don't miss this, or this signal means this, or this or this. So they're doing what a conductor would kind of in a way do in the real world, and the engineer, you're driving the train
Mhm.
where they tell you to, and it's a great way to learn a new layout. I mean, you may be operating in a new era. I'm in 2 weeks. I'm going to a layout that is based in the Civil War era. I don't know anything about how trains run in the Civil War era, but
Is that
I'll
Bernie
go there.
Kempinski?
And
Is it what, Seth?
Are you going to Bernie Kempinski's?
no, it's Tom Radis
Don't know
or
Tom's, but
something like that.
Bernie's is
Down in what's it called, New Jersey.
that
What's
place.
it called?
But what's it called? But yeah, so this weekend I'm going to a layout based in 2017. Next weekend I'm going to a layout based in the Civil War era.
And that is one of the fantastic things about ops. Everybody, has a prototype that speaks to them and they want to build. But there's lots of other things you can try. And the great thing about operations is you can go to other layouts. You can, take on the identity of that other character and away you go. So, among my regular layouts, what do we have? We have the Central Vermont in 1953. We have the Santa Fe in 1976. We have my layout, which is the Union Pacific in 1999. Many others that I've had the opportunity to operate repeatedly. Different times, different places, different styles of operation. Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes in 1920. Bernie Kempinski, the U.S. Military Railroad Aquia Line in 1863. You can be different people in different times. It's just so cool. You can just crank yourself into these time machines, and you don't even need a trolley pole at 87 miles an hour.
And you might be the most experienced operator in, let's say, on 1930s layouts, and then we throw you on a modern layout with a CTC system and tell you to go run out on the road, and you have no idea what any of the signals mean. You'll be just as lost as somebody that's brand new walking off the street. So
something to consider, though. Sorry, do you want to finish?
No, I was just going to say, so as a new person, even experienced people are new people when you go to a new layout.
Oh, for
absolutely. Sure. And even incredibly experienced people. I remember the first time I ran on a CTC layout. So under CTC, authority to proceed is conveyed by signal indication. If you have a more favorable indication than red, which is stop and stay, then you can, go at some speed on some route. And, as Heath says, there's different signaling systems in different eras. But, generally, if it's not red, you can go. The railroad adage is, if it ain't all red, it ain't red at all. Mm-hmm. I found it actually much harder than I expected because you have to find the signals, and it's a little bit of an Easter egg hunt on a new railroad the first time.
Yep, there's that too.
And I was riding back. It's actually very funny. Riding back to the hotel in an old Chevy Suburban, and the guy sitting next to me was a railroader, and he said, "Yep, it's just like work. Just ride home in the carryall." And I said, "Well, you got to tell me here. I just assumed the CTC railroad would be pretty straightforward because all you do is follow the lights. But where are the lights?" He says, "That's why we take 3 check rides before they let us out."
Yeah. There's something to be said also about when this happened to me recently. I don't remember if I told you this, Seth, but I went to the Central Vermont, Paul's layout for the first time ever. And to be honest, I was a little bit intimidated because it's very paperwork heavy. And I had never been there before, so I don't really know the layout. I mean, I had been there, but only on a casual visit just to look at it. And it was long before it had, as much scenery and such that it has now. So it was like the first time. And because it's paperwork heavy, and that's not really something that excited about, creating paperwork, filling out paperwork, handing the paperwork to the clerks and all that stuff. I was kind of like, I wasn't comfortable being the conductor. So I got paired with someone it was also his first time there, but he had been a real railroader and had worked as a dispatcher for several real railroads. So I'm like, well, I'll just let you do the paperwork stuff and be the conductor. And after we were done, I was thinking about it and I thought I should have just been the conductor because he didn't know any more about that layout than I did. And the part that sticks with me, two things, is I was worried, one, about getting done, and two, about being confused by the paperwork. And the fact of the matter is, I didn't have to be worried about either one of those things because it's an op session. It's not a real railroad. No one's going to get killed, and there's no railroad that's going to lose money because you didn't do your job right. The entire reason to be there is to slow down, take a break from reality as it is, and have fun and immerse yourself in that world and in that story that layout owner is telling. And I let my sort of stupid hangups, my own stupid hangups, get in the way of that. And I shouldn't have. Another recent experience I had where I had to take a step back and re-examine what I was doing was at another layout that we often operate together out here, Seth. It was at Dave Lovelace's. And I hadn't been there for a number of months because he had a bunch of work being done at the house and such, as you know. And I took, basically, the way that op session was working was what we call self-dispatching, where you go to the rack and you pull out whatever the next job is. They're on little clipboards, and then you just go do it, and you just communicate with people on the layout. Hey, I'm coming, make sure the main, or, clear the main so I can come through, that kind of stuff. There was no organized dispatcher that day. Anyway, I got like 2 or 3 through trains, and I really wanted to do a specific job that I had done the last time I was there and had a really good time doing it. And I wanted to try some of the tips or tricks that I learned that last time and try to apply them this time so that I could see if I was better at it, that kind of thing. And I found at 3:00 when the layout got turned off, because that's how he does things. He's like, hey, the layout's going off in 5 minutes and we're done. And it turns off and there's no more, I'm over here going, no, just one more move. Because I really wanted to finish the job that I wanted to do. And when it was all done, I'm like 050ing the cars around with my hands just to get it to the place that my OCD. Yeah. I mean, no one said anything, and it wasn't a big deal. Dave's really bad. Yeah, Dave's really nice about that. But I got my train all set up to return. It was a turn train, so it went out to a place and it was going to go back. Well, the guy that owns the locomotives comes by and says, "I'm taking my locomotive. The session's over." I'm like, "Come on, just one more move, And
he's a little gruff, isn't he?
But Seth, the session was over and he was taking his toys home. It's okay.
No, and they are wonderful. There's a friend of ours named Mark who
yes, they are wonderful, and they
amazing locomotive tuner, and he has just beautiful brass SP locomotives. So whenever we go to an SP locomotive that operates in the transition era, Mark brings wonderful stuff that runs beautifully,
like a Swiss watch.
Yes.
Now, the whole point to these stories that I'm telling is that you're there to have fun and slow down and have fun. It doesn't matter if you finish. It doesn't matter. It's either going to be picked up at the next session where you left off by someone else who's also excited to be there and wants to have fun, or it'll get restaged by the layout owner before the next session if that's what the appropriate thing is. But have fun. Slow down. Have fun. That's what you're there for. Enjoy the company of the people, because obviously if you didn't like the people, you wouldn't be there either, and just have fun with it. That's what we're there for. And I let my stupid OCD or uptightness about whatever I was doing really get in the way of that. And I still had fun, but I was thinking as we were driving home, I would have had more fun if I didn't have that problem of wanting to finish or whatever hang up I have. So anyway, that was my long-winded way of trying to tell people, just if you do get involved with ops, don't be afraid that you're going to mess something up. It's okay. No one's going to die. Nothing's going to break. Well, something might break, but everything that breaks can be fixed, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that kind of comes back to what we were saying about the Bay Area Ops Meet. We also, offer the same sorts of sessions at Pacific Coast Region conventions. We usually have an ops program. Generally, the understanding is that everybody is welcome. There may be a few owners who don't feel that way, and we manipulate the signups that way. So the idea is we don't want either the hosts or the guests to be uncomfortable. But if you're relatively inexperienced and you show up at one of these conventions, and a lot of other regions do this too, that's a perfectly good place to get started. And I know we have some people who operate pretty much once a year, and it's at the Pacific Coast Region convention, and or maybe they'll slip in an op and design meet. But yeah, I mean, that's what it's there for. Show up, have a good time. Just be reasonably respectful of the host's stuff and scheme, and you'll be fine.
Being respectful and having fun in general is more important than knowing everything.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
Otter Creek just popped that very question up. And that's really it. Don't touch stuff unless, you're told it's okay. I mean, generally if it's a layout full of shake the box cars, it's perfectly okay to re-rail stuff by hand. But, certainly if the owner has a lot of highly detailed stuff, they may ask that you not touch it. And even then it's usually, let me get comfortable with you, and, if I know you're okay, you can do that. But, don't handle things. Don't move cars by hand. I mean, those are some obvious, don't bring food into the layout room unless it's specifically okay. Usually drinks, or at least non-sticky drinks, are okay if there's cup holders below the layout, but everybody's got their own rules on that. Smoking's pretty much out everywhere at this point.
I will say, at least in this area, a lot of the operators have like a layout primer. Some layout owners have books. Some layout owners have one or two pages. But I have been going online and looking at people that have Facebook pages and websites and finding their operation primer information and downloading it and just kind of looking through it, because for me, I kind of find it interesting to see what is important. Did that happen, Thomas?
Boy, we hope not.
Yeah.
I once did that, actually. It was terrible. It was a narrow little, aisle in an operating pit. And, because I've kind of gotten blind, I had to lean back a little bit with my readers to see. And just at this point, I don't know if it was an FEF3, but it was some FEF, came along behind me and got caught in my shirt.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, oof. And then I stood up, and the thing, oh my God, I felt terrible. I need to talk to that owner and see if he was ever able to repair it. Otherwise, I owe him a steamer.
Looks like Thomas
was there.
Thomas is there.
Thanks. Had to bring that up, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, he was talking about that. Yeah, that was you, Seth. Oh, I just caught that now. Wow, Thomas, you're cruel. What a guy.
Oh, that was brutal. I felt so bad for Mark. Oh, that was
But if you're
awful.
good-natured, people understand that kind of stuff. I think too, you can't, if you're a host, you got to know that we're at the end of the day, we're playing with toys, right? I mean, like model railroaders don't like when you say that, but
I
it's
think we all know that. But I mean, this
that
was
is what
a
it is
beautiful
too.
model and quite expensive. And
Oh, I'm sure.
It's funny. I woke up a couple of months ago, just as one does in the middle of the night, particularly if one has sleep apnea, and that was on my mind, and I was just,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever made that right.
The last road train that I've run, at I think it was 2 Sundays ago. I derailed it in a spot where the layout owner had to climb in and under and use the stick to re-rail it. I ran through the signals multiple times where it kind of became a joke that I would call the dispatcher and say, "I did it again, didn't I? I ran through the signal again." But yeah, I mean, stuff happens.
But in the end, it's all pretty good natured.
Yeah.
Very early in my conversion to my railroad, my prototype really did have CTC, and we got as many layouts do. It turns out you typically have to get detection in early and make sure that's solid before you try to do anything else. So we had a little animated track map that showed occupancy, even though we were still dispatching with track warrants, which is a simple verbal authority, checkbox to proceed from A to B. And the young lady who is dispatching, very detail oriented, and she was watching this crew continually run its signal into the next block. And she was trying to hold that block open because there was a junction, and she could take that train off and get it off the railroad and into staging. And there's a certain amount of timing involved with this. And every time she thought she had her move lined up, this crew would run its authority. And finally, Ronnie just says, "This is DS58 SB5673 at Warm Springs. You have authority to work between Warm Springs and Irvington and no more."
That's clear.
Yep. Yeah.
And she's saying, "Was I too rough on him?" And everybody came over and says, "Ronnie, that was the best. He never watches his signals."
Something that I think is also important to know, especially if you're a new person and you want to get into operating and you want to be invited back. We're talking about etiquette, and Sydney says, well, what does being respectful look like? And I think we've covered a bunch of those things, but something to also remember is let the layout owner know if you break something, they know it's going to happen, right? So you're not, if anything, if you break something and they find out and you didn't tell them, you're less likely to be invited back than if you did break something and you told them.
Oh,
then,
yeah.
Right. And then Seth, you mentioned before about don't touch the equipment. And that goes doubly, especially for really detailed stuff, like I'm really hesitant to re-rail one of Mark's beautiful brass engines because, I might have eaten a donut when I got there and have oil on my fingers. Well, let's just say that again. I did eat a donut when I got there. And I may still have oil on my fingers from the donut, and I don't want to put big fingerprints on the guy's beautiful engine.
There are things you can do to defend yourself. I mean, have paper towels available, maybe some baby butt wipes to wipe your hands if you've really got greasy stuff.
Yeah.
But generally, I mean, nothing greasy, no chips, maybe pretzels, stuff like that. But generally the rule is, Split Rock's got it. We want to know. We can fix anything. We don't want our guests to show up and find stuff that's, not working at its best. I mean, that's embarrassing to us.
Yeah, or even a telephone pole on the side of the right of way. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
Just tell the guy, right? Or lady, whatever. I mean, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I've had this discussion, about, I used to publish on one of the local, the DCC lunch group, had a list that used to be fairly active. And, we'd get together for lunch on Friday because it was originally some club's DCC committee. And it basically became all the operators, who could get loose, having lunch at the local Chili's, speaking about greasy stuff on your fingers. And so we had this discussion. I said, oh, well, you're going to have a certain amount of battle damage. And one of the other owners just went ballistic. You can't have battle damage. It's bad. That's disrespectful. I never have anyone back like that. Well, this guy didn't operate a lot. And all the owners who did host, are just rolling their eyeballs. It's like, okay, if you're that concerned about it, don't put the nice resin sunset kits out, out on the layout, or, just, put all the shake the box stuff out. But nobody actually does that. And, we lose some stirrups and we lose some cut bars. And, I try to fix them when they're on the bench anyway, for whatever reason. But, frankly, for me, it's more important to have fun operating it. And I get more of a kick out of seeing people operating it than I really care about, all the grab irons and stirrups being on the cars. I mean,
Sure.
At the end of the day.
There's another thing that I've found, and that is, at least where I've been, they always appreciate knowing if something's having a problem. So if a particular turnout, if you keep derailing on it, or if the engine loses power over it or whatever, they also want to know that kind of stuff, so that if there is an issue, they can, figure it out, look at it, fix it. It could be a number of things, but if they know what happened and what was going on when it happened, that gives them a really good lead on fixing stuff. I'm not saying anything you don't know, Seth. I'm just saying for the audience, the most important thing though is to try it and have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And you may find out that you don't have fun doing it. That's okay too. Then you can do whatever you do like, right?
Well, there's plenty of other great hobby things to do within the hobby that are lots of fun.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of, making friends in the hobby and, really doing something that adds a nice dimension, to your life, particularly if you're retired and you don't have the, I got to go into work every day, so I, interact with people, like it or not. Operations is fantastic. You just really get to hang out with a lot of very interesting people, doing something you like, talking about trains you love. So, I mean, what's not to like?
Unless if I'm there, then the people aren't so interesting.
But one more etiquette thing real quick that I put in the chat just so I didn't forget it. But when you're leaving an op session, check your pockets.
Yeah, always check your pockets.
And that's primarily on layouts with car cards. But in general, anything you've picked up during the op session and put in your pockets or your bib or, anything like that, make sure you take it out. If you end up taking a car off the layout, make sure you take the car card as well. The layout owner will not know that you've stolen the car if you take the car card. If you take the car and don't take the car card, they'll find out. That actually came from Thomas Splitrock, but
I saw that. What was that on your stream last?
I like the good
Splitrock
hygiene part. Yeah.
What was the hygiene?
You're going to be in a narrow basement with a dozen guys for a couple hours. This would be a good morning to take a shower.
Yeah, that's
there's a joke about narrow aisles and having a lower deck, and something about a headbutt where you actually end up with your head on someone's butt because you had to bend down to re-rail something.
Well,
that was
one of the
really
layouts
too
I
much
operate under,
information,
the yard guys are inside something. So when you have to climb out from underneath, a lot of times you're coming up under somebody else that's operating. So yeah, it does happen.
Yeah, don't eat garlic the night before. That's a bad thing, right? Don't drink a bunch of
but in the Bay
stuff.
Area, we kind of have a tradition of going to Mexican places at lunch. So that doesn't speak well for the afternoon.
Maybe that's why people don't show up for the afternoon part of the session.
Split Rock, yes.
Oh, that's too funny. It's too funny. Yeah.
Man.
Oh,
And if you're building a layout for operations, reminder, build your aisles for model railroaders, not for your average adult.
Yeah. Our friend, I don't know if you've heard this story, Heath, but our friend Murph from Silicon Valley Lines, he dispatches on SVL from his house in Boulder Creek. Well, he's building a layout, and he created it in the little design program, whatever it was, and he created something that he called a virtual Murph. That was a circle that's about the size. Murph is a rotund guy. He's a big guy. And so he said his rule.
He was an athlete earlier in his life.
Oh, yes, he was. Oh, yeah.
When he stopped,
I don't know if you know this, Seth, but he actually shared with me a video that was a film of him competitive ice skating, doing his routine. It was amazing. He was really, really good. And I'm not an ice skating person, so I can't say I know all the moves and all that, but I've seen stuff like on the Olympics, and I'm like, he was good.
Yeah,
anyway,
he was very good. Anyway,
Yeah,
his story was, of course, when he stopped competing, he was still on the dinner circuit.
yes.
And the circle moved to his gut.
Yeah.
Yeah. He made what he called virtual Murphs, and his rule was that every aisle must be able to hold 2 virtual Murphs back to back. And so that was his solution, right? So,
Yeah.
and I got to tell you, having done the layout tour videos, I've gone to layouts with such narrow choke point aisles that I can't even get through with my camera unless I completely collapse everything and make myself small and go through sideways. Think, Seth, about Otis McGee's on that upstairs where there was that one aisle that got really tight before the helix would have been on the left.
Otis had a John Armstrong design layout, and a John Armstrong, for those of you who are into layout design, wrote Layout Design for Realistic Operations, which is pretty much the Bible of layout design. But John was a skinny little guy.
Yeah.
And
it would have worked for him.
Yeah.
It probably would have. And
I'm not a big fat guy, but I could barely fit through the aisle.
Very tight. And I love that layout, but I got to say, I love dispatching that layout, especially. There are some layouts where maybe there are compromises when you're out on the layout itself. But that was an issue. And another pitch for the layout design SIG, they'll give you some good rules. But I mean, we always used to think that 3 foot is about the minimum aisle if people are going to be passing. And I would say these days it's more like 42 inches.
This is a good
that's
Thomas, we got to have you on here sometime, or I'd like to come on to your show and talk with you about stuff, because his comments are always so insightful.
This is absolutely correct. I mean, you need a few ringers. Most layout owners here, if they're concerned about having quality sessions, limit the number of new guys.
Yes.
I mean, obviously you want new guys to be inclusive and to keep your pool of operators up. But if you have more than 2 or 3 new guys, you start having a lot of problems just due to people not being familiar with the layout. So Rick Fortin, for example, has a protocol. New guys come in, the first train they go out, they'll take something that runs across the layout with a pilot, with somebody who knows the layout. Then we'll put them on the crew, usually as the engineer, of a local in the afternoon. And there's a couple of locals that are not tricky, but, still fun. And they'll get one of those. And, after that, the next time, fine, they're in the pool, they can bid for whatever they want.
There's something else, Seth, I think bears mentioning, which is, as a new person, if you're showing up to a layout, let the layout owner know what your actual level is. Don't go in and be afraid to tell them, look, I've never been on a timetable and train order layout, so I really don't know what I'm doing. Because if you show up and you don't express that kind of information, you may get on a really bad for you job. And you don't want that because it won't be fun for you and it won't be fun for the other people either.
Right. And you can mess it up. So, you know, you don't want to do that. So,
yeah.
I mean, a good example.
In my experience, if you go to a timetable and train order layout, all of the regulars will have the yard jobs and they force the new guys to figure out the timetables, go out on the road. And it's only once you get experience that you get off the darn road.
You know,
the yardies are, you know, a little different. And I mean, that's a good topic for an hour sometime.
Yeah.
But you know, the thing is, the good job to get, you know, the first time you're out, certainly the first time you're out solo on a TT and TO railroad is a first class train, preferably in the superior direction.
Yeah.
Because then really all you need to do is worry about managing your train and staying on schedule. Pretty much everybody has to get out of your way. You might get an order, you know, that reduces
on or behind schedule, not ahead of schedule.
Right.
Yeah, trains never leave ahead of schedule. That just doesn't happen.
If you start getting behind, then you'll start getting a bunch of orders because the dispatcher, you know, nobody can move against you if you're the first class train. So he'll have to start writing helping orders to get everybody else moving. So you'll find that you're getting restricted from here to here, or your meets are getting moved so that you're not plugging the railroad. But that's a fairly good, you know, because you get used to the forms and how it's done and the general scheme of the thing. You know, then, you know, next time, you know, go out as the engineer of a extra or a third class freight. Now, you know, you're pretty close to the bottom of the pecking order and you're dodging everybody else, and you really get the flavor of what TT and TO is about. And the nice thing is that, you know, the third class trains and the extras tend to have more work. So, you know, you can get off the main and switch your town and not have to worry so much about timetable and train order, you know, until you're done. And then, of course, you're coming out. Let's see, who went by? What time is it? Whose time am I on?
Right. Speaking of who went by and what time it is it? That was one of the things that I will always remember, and that is to get on with a more experienced person, because if you can, because I remember one of my really early on experiences with TT and timetable and train order was at a layout, and you were there, Seth, and I've told this story with you present before, where I had finished what I was doing, my work in this area, and I didn't know if I could go. And I looked at the timetable. I'm like, well, it looks like I should be able to go, but I don't know if this train came through. So I came over to you, Seth. You had dispatched in the morning, and I think you were just operating or whatever in the afternoon. I'm like, Seth, I'd like to leave, but how do I know if I can leave? And you said, well, check the register. And I had never heard of that before. I didn't know what a register was. So I think I said, well, what's the register? I don't know what that is. And then you explained it to me without cussing. Thank you. And and then I learned what a register was. So the next time I was at a TT and TO layout, I knew to check the register. So that's another thing. Like, nobody arrives for the first time knowing and understanding all that stuff. So you do have to ask, and don't be afraid to ask, you know, what's going on, because as you pick things up, it'll become easier. And, you know, there are other things too, like, you know, what's a facing point turnout? What's a trailing point set out? Like, what are these things? And these are all things that you'll pick up if you do the easy jobs first, or if you go as the engineer with an experienced conductor, you'll learn all that stuff. So I think being aware, it's again, a long way of saying being aware of your own limitations, or knowing what you don't know, if you will, goes a long way. And being honest about that with the layout owner and the other operators really goes a long way toward basically learning that stuff. Because if you don't know it, you know, you can't. How are you supposed to know something you don't know unless you ask, right? I guess is the real moral to that story. Anyway.
And people at the ops sessions, the host and everybody else, 99% of them want to promote the hobby.
Absolutely.
And would love to explain it to you. They'd love to tell you, you know, what rule 25 is and what rule whatever this is and that. And sometimes, you know, you get more than you bargained for, but you'll know you'll know the next time what the answer is.
Something else to consider, and I have a thick skin, so it never bothers me if someone harangues me about something. I mean, I'll be the one to tell them, oh, I actually ran that signal. I thought it, you know, I wouldn't say it seriously. I thought that didn't matter. You know, that would be my joke if I had been harangued for doing it before. But go with a thick skin, because a lot of times people there are very familiar with each other. And half of the time you're giving someone crap because that's how you express that you like them. And not everybody's wired that way. So if you show up and someone is giving you crap, they're probably joking. So you can't take what you're doing too seriously or be too defensive about it. If I'm there and I don't know you, I probably won't do that.
Right.
But if I, like Heath, if you came out to an op session and really screwed up, you'd never hear the end of it from me. But I'm not doing that because I think you're a jerk or an idiot or I hate you. I'm doing it because it's fun and funny to, you know, and I fully expect you to get me back at some point when I screw up.
100%. Absolutely.
You know, I think that goes across all levels of experience. I was fortunate, you know, in the 2000 time frame to have the chance to go to a couple of Prairie Rails, which is a big sort of invitational meet, and it's generally held in February of even years in Kansas City. And I found myself at a well-known layout with a bunch of very well-known operators. And I was, you know, not unfamiliar with TT and TO, but I didn't hold myself out as much of an expert. And, you know, I was watching and I saw somebody, you know, go past a red order board, and I was kind of wondering about that because you're supposed to stop. But, you know, this guy had been a professional railroader, and I assumed he knew what he was doing. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, he's nose to nose with another train from another famous model railroader. And I just kind of watched this whole thing. And there was, you know, great hilarity and lots of ribbing as the guy with 30 years seniority, you know, backed his train 30 feet. Picked up the order that had restricted him at the point of restriction, which normally means you have to stop and sign for it, and let the other person who was well known in the model railroad press proceed. And it was very amusing. So, you know, I mean, I've seen guys with lots more experience than you do that boneheaded move.
I was operating in a very well-known layout, and someone who will remain nameless because I'm not into throwing people under the bus.
But it's warm down here.
Yeah, someone showed up and said, "Why is there a train on the main?" And I looked at him and I said, "Because you're supposed to meet me down there where you just came from." And I showed him in the timetable. See, it's bold. That means it's a meet, and you're not supposed to be here yet.
Oh, yes.
That was I
think somebody missed. Missed a meeting. Where was it? King City or someplace.
It was a place called Emory, actually.
Was it Emory?
But
this
anyway,
one at Lovelace's?
No. This was at Jack Burgess's layout.
Oh yeah.
I think, were you there? I think
that was me.
I said I wasn't gonna. I'll let you throw yourself under the bus, though. I just had a great time though. So it's like, hey, wait a minute. I thought you know what you're doing.
That's something pretty wild as well that just made me think of is like you hear about like Jack Burgess or, you know, Tony Custer or whatever, all these people, and then you get to go operate on their railroad.
How cool is that?
And it's like, wait, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like I do, you know? And it's really this, it's an interesting world that these people you hear about in books or read about or whatever, like you can actually have access to if you're,
sure,
you know, respectful and all those things. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And I got to tell you, Heath, that everybody in this area where I live, I feel so lucky.
Yeah.
Everybody that, like the people that, like who you're talking about, and that includes this guy that we're talking to today, are so nice and welcoming and helpful, and will give you the shirt off their back, literally, if you are, you know, showing interest and are respectful and everything that you said. So yeah, and it's
only because we have all these shirts from meets and we can never use them all. But
yeah, well, you know, and I still have a shirt you gave me that was from some, I think it might have been from the 2021 virtual thing that we did. I still have it. So when I say that, they will literally give you the shirt off their back. He did. But anyway, I've realized now that I'm having a great time, and I would probably talk until you know, midnight my time, which is 3 a.m. for you, Heath. But we don't really have that kind of time here today, and we should probably wrap this up here at some point.
What did we say at the beginning? You know, basically, we're going to end up having a great conversation, and we hope you all enjoyed it with us.
Right. I think that we succeeded in that. And frankly, I'm surprised that the time has gone by so fast. Looking up, yeah, Sid says we need more ops talk. And, you know, I'm up to do this again whenever you guys want. I'm sure we have other operations stories and you know, I think, though, that hopefully by people listening to it, because, I mean, full disclosure, I'm pretty new into ops. I've only been doing it 5 years now, more seriously in the past 2 to 3 years. So I'm pretty new to it. Heath,
you had 2 pretty dry years in ops in there. You know?
We had COVID, right? So, but you know, Heath, you're fairly new into it. Seth has been around doing it forever. I mean, this guy's never home because he's off on operating trips. That's how into it he is. So I think that, or I hope that by people listening to us talking about it, have perceived this idea that it can be a really, really fulfilling way to enjoy this hobby of model railroading. It's not building, it's not doing scenery, it's not weathering, it's role playing the jobs that someone was nice enough to create on their layout to simulate the operations of a real railroad, and it's a lot of fun. So hopefully that, you know, listening to us talk about it, people will get the idea to try to reach out there and get out and try it, see if they like it. Chances are, if they're into, you know, trains at all, they will enjoy it because it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. Yep.
Yeah. So with that, I want to thank both of you guys for taking the time to be here. Heath, thank you very much for guest co-hosting again.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. I found out recently that my regular co-host is likely no longer going to be my regular co-host. So I'll be looking for guest co-hosts or a rotating, you know, slate of regular guest co-hosts. So stick that in your back pocket. I'd be really happy and honored if either one of you guys ever wanted to come on as a guest co-host for this program, because I do enjoy doing the program and enjoy the interaction that it provides for the viewers to also be able to ask questions and have a conversation of their own here in the text. So anyway, with all that being said, thanks everybody else for watching, and also to our moderators in the chat for keeping things on track. I know, the eyes roll. Seth just almost vomited in his own mouth. It's so bad. and I'm trying to scramble around. I do this every time. I'm scrambling around on my computer screen to find the little music that plays at the end.
I was wondering if that's what you were doing or not doing,
right?
as the case may be.
Am I that transparent?
As well, you didn't
Yeah.
check the timetable, did you? And you
I
missed
left
finding the right button.
I left without checking the register.
Yes, yeah, you did not get your Form A.
Yeah. So if you guys would be so kind to hang out for about 30 or 40 seconds while the music plays, I'll talk to you in a minute, okay? Thanks everybody else for watching. We'll see you next time.